You're now entering Red Zone with Chairman Rick Scott. Paid for by the NRSC, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. NRSC.org.
Hi, this is Rick Scott. I'm the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. We have a podcast. It's called the NRSC Red Zone. And today I have my good friend, the senator's, I guess, second-term senator from the great state of Texas, which I used to live in. It's a wonderful place.
Well,
so
once a Texan, always a Texan, so we'll still claim you.
Well, my daughters were born there, and one of them lives there. Actually, one lives there. Well, more importantly, I have two grandsons, our grandson and granddaughter. So you've been real involved in the Supreme Court.
Yep.
So talk about what you were able to do under Trump, because you got 3 Supreme Court nominees confirmed, and how important the Supreme Court is, and how you think about the Supreme Court, and why it's so important.
Look, I think the Supreme Court is hugely important. It may well be the single most long-lasting legacy of the Trump presidency. The 3 Supreme Court justices that he nominated that we confirmed, the hundreds of Court of Appeals and District Court judges that were nominated and confirmed during those 4 years. And I got to say, it was a remarkable, the talent level that was put forward. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book that's called One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. And the whole book is talking about why the court matters. And each chapter in the book addresses a different constitutional right. So there's a chapter on free speech, a chapter on religious liberty, a chapter on the Second Amendment, a chapter on crime, and it goes through major landmark cases at the court. And what it does, instead of talking about them in the abstract, it tells war stories.
Yeah, it's way more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's about litigating the cases and about being right in the middle of what was going on and what was at stake. And what is striking is on issue after issue, so many of the landmark decisions at the court are 5-4. They're one vote away, and we are one vote from either keeping our rights or losing our rights. And that's something, I think it powerfully motivates the American people, so much so that I think if Antonin Scalia had not died in 2016, I think Hillary Clinton would have been elected president. Mm-hmm. That
showed how important the election. That election a lot was about who was going to be on the Supreme Court.
Well, and I'll tell you, so when Scalia died, it was in the middle of the presidential season, and in fact, the day he died was the day of the South Carolina debate, and so I still remember I was in South Carolina with my debate prep team, and we were getting ready for the debate that evening, and it so happened we got advance notice that Scalia died. Because the sheriff in Texas who found the body, he was at a hunting ranch in West Texas. And so the sheriff called both me and John Cornyn to give us a heads up that Scalia was dead. And this was probably 2 hours before the news broke publicly. And my body guy walks in. He's a great guy. I love him like a brother. He walks in and he goes, hey, you know the thing. I'm like, what thing? The Scalia thing. What Scalia thing? He's dead. We're just like, holy crap. So that bombshell drops on us. Immediately we scrap all the debate prep and sit down and talk about, okay, what are we going to do? Mm-hmm. What's the right response for this? It was obvious a lot of the debate that night was going to focus on that.
Completely changed, wouldn't it? Yeah.
And the big question, and you'll appreciate, so it's before, Rick, you had joined us, but you'll appreciate the dynamic in the conference. The big question is, okay, what's the Senate going to do? And I decided, okay, it is critical that we don't fill this seat. That filling this seat
Did you come out right that time?
Would be monumentally stupid. So I wrote a statement at the time, which we sat on until the news broke. But the instant the news broke, I put out a statement saying we should keep this seat open and allow the voters in November to decide. And you can appreciate, look, in many ways it is remarkable. In the Republican conference, you've seen sometimes we stand and fight and sometimes we cut and run. It is an absolute miracle that we kept the conference together, did the right thing, and kept that seat open. And it ended up, Mitch McConnell ended up later that day coming out and saying we're going to keep the seat open. Chuck Grassley came out and said we're going to keep the seat open, and we unified the entire conference. And that
was not easy.
It was not remotely easy, and I will admit, I talk about this in the book, but you'll laugh at this. One of Mitch's former chiefs of staff talks about one of the reasons he came out for it publicly is he knew that night at the debate that I would call for keeping it open. And his former chief said, well, Mitch didn't want to seem like he was following Ted's lead, so he just decided to come out and do it initially. And I found that out later. I said, fantastic. I'll take yes for an answer.
Doesn't matter. You get the right result.
If we get to the right result, it doesn't matter who gets the credit.
Right.
But the fact that we kept that seat open, I think, was a powerful motivator for millions of people. Let's take an issue
They
like...
didn't know Donald Trump at the time.
Right, didn't know Donald Trump, but it became a clear choice.
Right.
Remember, Trump said that he would appoint a justice in the mold of Scalia and Thomas. He put out a list of these are the names I'm going to pick from, which I think was a brilliant decision to specify it. It got him trust with some voters at the time who didn't know what to expect.
Just didn't know him, yeah.
Look, for me, it was pivotal. It's actually was the reason I ended up supporting it, is because of the Supreme Court. And you think about how close that 2016 election was. That, 120,000 votes flipped the other direction in the wrong states, and Hillary's president.
Right.
And I think without that vacancy,
Think about that. That would have been, yeah.
we have a Hillary Clinton presidency, and God knows where the country is. And then, we came in and had the fight over Neil Gorsuch, and then Brett Kavanaugh, and then Amy Coney Barrett, and that people care about their fundamental rights. They care about free speech. They care about religious liberty. They care about the Second Amendment. These issues matter, and they especially care about crime. I think that issue in this past year, with the Democrats as nutty as they are, it's really been driven home.
It's just hard to believe. So talk about Jackson. So here you got this far left dark money helping her, right?
Yep.
She's been somebody that her when she was at the district level, completely overturned unanimously for wrong legal precedent. She sure appears she's going to be an activist judge.
Yep.
And talk about her. Talk about the importance of having somebody that's going to follow the Constitution.
Yeah. So I've actually known Ketanji a long time.
Oh, have you?
We were classmates in law school. She was a year behind me, but we were both on the law review together. So I've known her since we were in our mid-20s. Personally speaking, she's very bright. She's very charming. She's personal. She smiles a lot. Like everybody liked her. She's easy to like. She's charming and affable and easygoing. That being said, I think her record is exceptionally troubling. And if you look at her record, she went on, she clerked for a district court, a court of appeals. She clerked for Steve Breyer at the U.S. Supreme Court. She was a federal public defender. In fact, she'll be the first Supreme Court justice ever to be a public defender, if she's confirmed. Which means her job every day was to go represent murderers and rapists and criminals. And I got to say, people who often go work as defenders, they have an inclination in that direction already. That's their that's their basic life orientation in the law. If people say, I want to go be a prosecutor, it's usually because they want to lock up bad guys. And if people go be a public defender, it's usually because they think that the criminals are being wrongly treated. Well, that pattern proved true with her. So she became a federal district judge in D.C. And if you look at her district judge record, it is very, very liberal, especially on crime.
Which is hard to believe.
It is.
Every neighborhood in this country cares about living in a safe neighborhood, rich or poor.
It's absolutely true. So you look at her, for all criminal defendants, the average sentence she's imposed on criminal defendants is about a third less of what district judges across the country typically impose. So she's got a 33% discount. It's even worse, though, for sex offenses, and in particular child pornography. And
why do you think?
So it sounds weird. Like when I first saw the information on
Right.
the child porn cases, my reaction is, come on, that's got to be that can't be right. I mean, who's soft on child porn? That's nasty stuff.
Mm-hmm. Just think about your kids, right?
Well,
Your grandkids.
you would think.
Right.
But then you look at her cases. So the universe of cases, she's got 10 cases that she had that dealt with child porn. So it's not one or two, it's 10. And she consistently, 100% of the time, would sentence defendants where she had discretion way below the sentencing guidelines and way below what the prosecutor came in asking for. And it's a pattern that is, I mean, there's no deviation. It is true in every single case she has discretion. I then went and I read her sentencing hearings. And in the sentencing hearings, she expresses how she disagrees with these tough sentences for child pornographers, for people that either in possession of child pornography or are distributing child pornography, giving it to others. And look,
It's disgust you think about, right?
well, and it's worse than that because I had to read through the
Right.
records in these cases. And look, this is not obscenity. This is not consenting adults with a naked picture. Mm-hmm. This is the sexual assault of little kids. And what we're talking about here is videos of children 8, 9, 10, in some instances, literally, and it's sickening, toddlers and infants being sexually assaulted by adults, and people with videos of this. There's a whole market for these sick bastards. And over again, when she has someone that has hundreds or even thousands of pictures and videos of children being assaulted, she gives them a slap on the wrist and sentences them to very, very short sentences. The one that was most extreme is a guy named Hawkins, who was 18 years old, and he had pictures of little boys, 10, 11, as young as 8 years old, being sexually assaulted. The guidelines provided for a 10-year sentence in jail because he distributed those videos. The prosecutor in D.C., pretty liberal prosecutor, came in and asked for 2 years. She sentenced him to 3 months. And if you look at I read the sentencing hearing. Her reasoning is, she says, well, you're not a pedophile. You're just curious. You're just a little curious. And these were your peers. They were roughly the same age. Now, I'm sorry, an 18-year-old man is not the same age as an 8-year-old little boy. No. And the pattern of this is consistent, and I got to say it's disturbing. I did a study this weekend. I had my team examine the sentences she imposed in these cases compared to the sentences that federal judges imposed across the country.
Oh, I saw that.
And she
That was
is
helpful.
Massively below,
right,
nearly 60% below what other federal judges sentence for possession of child pornography, and nearly 50% below what other federal judges sentence for the distribution of child porn. Rick, I think if she gets confirmed, and right now it looks like she's going to be.
She's going to, yeah.
If she gets confirmed, I believe she will be the most liberal Supreme Court justice out of all 9. And I believe in particular on crime, that she is going to consistently rule in favor of letting the bad guys out, in favor of releasing murderers, in favor of releasing rapists, in favor of striking down tough penalties on criminals. And I'd bet you $100 right now she will vote to strike down the death penalty is unconstitutional.
So think about that, and then think about this court packing.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll have 3, and she'll be the most liberal. And then what happens if they'll go pack the court?
All right, so we've got an election in November. I think everyone, you and me included, believes this election is going to be a really good election for us. But if it's not, let's assume catastrophically it becomes a Democrat election.
Yeah.
And let's assume Democrats hold the House and pick up 2 seats in the Senate. If that happens, they will pack the court. It's not even, it's not if, it's when. The only reason they didn't pack the court in this past year is because Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema refused to nuke the filibuster.
Right.
If they got 2 more Ds,
Yeah,
they don't care what Joe and Kyrsten say. And as you know, we've got a bunch of potentially vulnerable Republican seats on the ballot. Now, I think we're going to be in good shape for them, but if the numbers turned dramatically, we could lose 2 seats.
Yeah.
And if they have 52 instead of 50 Democrats, we will see a court with 13 justices instead of 9, and 4 new left-wing justices, with suddenly Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson in a majority striking down. For example, they will strike down the Heller decision, which protects the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. They will strike down Citizens United, which protects the right to speak politically. They will strike down every school choice program in America. One of the chapters in my book talks about school choice in the case Zellman versus Simmons-Harris, which upheld the school choice program in Ohio. It was 5-4. And I got to say, putting on your prior hat, not the Navy hat, but your governor hat, look, there's no state in the union that has done more on school choice than Florida. And Florida really has led, going back to Jeb Bush, there's a long history of Florida. Jeb did a lot on choice. If the Democrats pack the court, school choice programs are struck down all over the country.
And who gets hurt the most? People that can't afford private school.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. People with money, they get to go. They have school choice. It's the poor that don't.
The rich have always had it. The middle class have always had it. I use an example in D.C. You take the Bethesda public schools. As you know, Bethesda's this fancy neighborhood right outside D.C. If the Bethesda public school had a 50% dropout rate, if the students that remained, 70% of them graduated without reading at grade level, if you had drug dealers walking down the halls, if you had little girls getting sexually assaulted in the bathrooms, those schools would be empty.
Yeah, because people can afford it.
The parents all had money. They'd either pay tuition to go to private schools, or they'd move. They'd move somewhere where there was a better public school. Either way, they would not. They have choice.
Yeah.
And if you're a low-income single mom in Anacostia, a very low-income neighborhood in D.C., and you're facing a public school with the exact same characteristics, you're trapped. You don't have a choice. Your kid is stuck. It's immoral what we do. And so I think choice, there's no issue I'm more passionate about than school choice.
Talk about the Biden foreign policy. You've been the leader in fighting to sanction Nord Stream 2.
Yeah.
You were very vocal on what happened in Afghanistan. You've been very vocal that we've got to sanction and deal with Russia. So talk about the Biden foreign policy.
It's bizarre. As bad as Biden's domestic and economic policy has been, and it's been a train wreck. Yeah. I mean, it's almost hard to get every policy issue right. I mean, you would think just by random luck. I mean, if they rolled dice or threw darts at a board, they'd get something right just by accident. But across the board, economic policy is a train wreck, domestic policy is a train wreck, and as bad as both of them are, foreign policy is worse.
Yeah.
Every single region on earth has gotten more dangerous. Right. And Biden combines a radical leftism, an endemic weakness on foreign policy, with just manifest incompetence. I mean, these guys can barely find the rear end with both hands. So you look at what they've done. They've alienated our friends and allies systematically, from Israel to Guatemala to Egypt to India to Brazil. Look, these are Brazil is the largest country in Latin America, is a democracy headed by a pro-America leader who the Biden administration hates and is trying to drive away. India is the largest democracy on earth, has been pivoting hard towards America. The Biden administration hates them and is trying to drive them away. Israel.
Colombia.
They're
not helping. They won't help Duque in Colombia.
You literally make a list of who are our friends.
And they're not doing anything against Maduro in Venezuela, nothing against the Castro regime. We got 1,300 peaceful protesters in Cuba. When I called the White House, they hung up on me. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
You literally, if they make a list of friends and enemies, they're nice to the enemies, they're mean to the friends.
Right.
But it's not just nice. They have an approach that if you give bad guys what they want. So Biden's foreign policy is weakness and appeasement. And so, all right, let's take Russia and Ukraine. We're in the middle of the biggest war in Europe since 1945, since the end of World War II. What's maddening is this was preventable. It didn't have to happen, and I think it's the cause of two political decisions by Biden. Number one, the disastrous surrender and withdrawal in Afghanistan, surrendering to the Taliban. Every enemy of America took a measure of the man in the Oval Office and came away with the conclusion that Biden was weak and feckless and ineffective. That's a real problem when the president...
It doesn't matter what our military can do.
Right.
It doesn't matter at all.
It's Putin looked at Biden and said, he ain't going to do nothing. And Xi looked at him, and the Ayatollah looked at him, and Maduro looked at him. All the bad guys looked at Biden and said, okay.
This is our time.
Yeah. But then secondly, if you look specifically to Russia and Ukraine, as you know, Putin didn't wake up yesterday and decide he wanted to invade Ukraine. He's wanted to do this for decades. He longs to reassemble the old Soviet Union. And he did invade Ukraine previously. In 2014, he invaded Crimea, the southern portion of Ukraine. But he didn't invade the whole of the country. And the reason he didn't invade the rest of it is that he needs the Ukrainian energy infrastructure, the pipelines. Putin gets all of his money selling oil and gas, and the natural gas runs on pipelines right through the middle of Ukraine. And if he invaded, he risked damaging or destroying those pipelines. So the next year, 2015, he launched a project. It's called Nord Stream 2, as you know well. It is an undersea pipeline that runs straight from Russia to Germany, skips Ukraine altogether. The whole point of Nord Stream 2 was when it was completed, he could get his gas to Europe and invade Ukraine at his heart's content because he didn't need their pipelines.
And it keeps getting his revenues.
So in 2019, I wrote sanctions legislation to stop Nord Stream 2. Passed the Senate, passed the House, overwhelming bipartisan support. President Trump signs it into law. Putin stops building Nord Stream 2 literally the day Trump signs my sanctions legislation. For over a year, the pipeline is dead. It is a hunk of metal at the bottom of the ocean. Joe Biden becomes president on January 20th, 2021. 4 days later, January 24th, Putin begins deep-sea construction of Nord Stream 2.
I'm sure we got something for it, right?
Not a damn thing. And a few months later, Biden formally waived sanctions on Nord Stream 2. When he did so, President Zelensky, Ukraine said publicly, if you do this, Putin will invade Ukraine. Poland, who knows something about Soviet occupation, Poland said, if Biden waives sanctions on Nord Stream 2, Putin will invade Ukraine. As you know, I stood on the Senate floor and said, Mr. President, if you do this, we will see Russian tanks in the streets of Kiev. And I wish all of us had been wrong. But it was eminently predictable. And the Biden team, they begin in every instance where there's a bad guy. They want to give them what they want. They want to surrender.
Right.
And usually they want to pay them. It is, and every region of the world has gotten worse, and America's safety is more imperiled than it has been in a long time.
There's more risk that our men and women are going to be going to war.
That's exactly
because of
right.
this stuff. I mean, it makes you mad. Talk about the border.
Yeah.
You're one of two Republican senators that are in a border state. We've got, clearly it seems like an open border. Now we've got the Title 42. So talk about what's going on in the border and how it's impacting people in Texas.
You know, I will say Steve Daines might argue with you on that and claim he's in a border state.
True.
But, you know, and if suddenly a bunch of Canucks start invading us from the north, we'll have to deal with that challenge. Look, what's happening on the border, we've never seen anything like it. As you know, last year I brought 19 senators down to the border. You came and joined us to see firsthand, because there's nothing like seeing it with your own eyes. Right. Last year we had 2 million people cross illegally. It's the worst illegal immigration in 62 years. And just like the war in Ukraine, this is a man-made crisis. It was caused by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and it was caused by very specific political decisions. There's cause and effect.
Clearly intentional.
Yeah. And they're continuing them. So it's not even like it was unintended consequences. These are intended consequences. This is the outcome they want. 3 decisions Joe Biden did on his first day in office. He immediately halted construction of the border wall. You remember, you and I saw just chunks of heavy equipment and
the wall would be there,
dropped.
and the fence would be here. The gate would be here, and it would just not be done.
Yep. They literally ordered them drop everything where it is.
Right.
We saw things rusting outside because the contractors were forbidden from finishing the job.
Paid not to finish the job.
That's exactly right. Number two, they reinstated catch and release. So now, we all went to the midnight muster of the Border Patrol, which I've done a bunch of times, and those guys are such salt of the earth, such amazing men and women.
So committed.
And frustrated.
To our safety.
Yes.
They put their lives on the line every day for our safety.
And I got to say, Rick, I don't know how every one of them doesn't quit tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because they're risking their lives. They go catch dangerous traffickers. They bring them in, and their political superiors let them go. And they do it over and over. And they keep catching the same guys. It is maddening. But the third thing they did, and the hardest thing to justify, is Biden on day one ended the Remain in Mexico agreement. Now, you and I both know what that is. Trump negotiated it with Mexico. And Remain in Mexico was an agreement that people who cross illegally into Mexico, mostly from Central America, would remain in Mexico while their U.S. asylum case was proceeding. And it worked. It worked incredibly well. It produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. We were seeing massive success. What did Joe Biden do on day one? Ripped it up and said, Katie barred the door, and everyone came in.
Yeah. So what's going to happen with Title 42?
Well, the news reports today are they're ending it, that they're ending the use of it. So, this is an administration that still claims they're focused on COVID. This is an administration that still mandates idiotically that you wear a mask on a plane.
Right.
That has now decided we want to let in every illegal immigrant we can with COVID. That we don't care. We're going to let you in with COVID because we care about open borders more than we do about the safety and security of our country.
Yeah. And 100,000 people died of drug overdoses last year. That's about 1 over 3,000 Americans died of a drug overdose. And it's kids that just foolishly bought a Xanax online and took it and were dead within a minute.
And it's, you and I have both visited with parents who've lost their kids. And it is, look, I got to say, it's a different world from when you and I were kids.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there was not, look, when we were high school kids, parents worried about drunk driving. You don't want your kid getting in the car with some drunk idiot. And my parents were very adamant about, don't do that. And look, you had kids, they'd drink a beer, they might smoke a joint. But most of the things you were doing in high school or college were not, in all likelihood, going to endanger your life.
Right.
The terrifying thing is you could have a kid who's a good kid, who's not a drug user, who goes to a party and some friend says, hey, try a Xanax or try a Ritalin or try some pill that they ordered online. And these counterfeiters make them and they put fentanyl in there and it is so powerful. And these guys are shoddy. They're not drug manufacturers. They don't know what they're doing. And if they put 1 or 2 grains too much of fentanyl in it, they just fall over dead.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
It's scary. You got young kids.
I've got girls that are 13 and 11. I actually did to both my girls an illustration that a DEA agent showed me, which is you take a packet of Sweet and Low. And I had my girls do this in our living room. So we all had packets of Sweet and Low, and I open it up, dump all the Sweet and Low out, so it's just empty. So you just got the packet. Then you stick your finger in the packet of Sweet and Low and pull it out, and you can see a couple of tiny specks that are still there. That's enough fentanyl to kill you. Like just the tiny residue from the packet. And I had both my girls do that and say, look, my eldest daughter's 13. She goes to parties. She's in 8th grade. I don't know if some idiot kid will say, here's something harmless, try it.
Right.
And if you do that once and it's the wrong pill, that's
You're over.
It's
can you imagine losing a kid?
No, I don't.
Can't imagine.
It is the most horrific nightmare any human can imagine, and
it's happening all over the country.
Yeah.
So, okay, talk about 22. We're a 50-50 Senate.
Yeah.
So you talked about it a little bit. So how are we going to do? Why is it so important everybody get out there and help us make sure we win?
So, I am incredibly optimistic about 22. I think it's not just going to be a wave election. I think it's going to be a tsunami. It's going to be a tidal wave. I put the odds of Republicans taking the House at north of 90%. I think the real question in the House is how big a majority, and I think we could very easily arrive in January with a big majority in the House. I think that's very much in play. So, for example, in Texas, South Texas, I think, is turning red. And there are 3 Hispanic women running in South Texas in Democratic seats. As Republicans, I think we got a good shot at winning at least 2 and maybe all 3 of those seats.
That'd be great.
I mean, it's a big deal. The Senate, every day I'm getting more optimistic, and my personal handicapping is about 65-35 that we win the Senate. Where do you feel? I mean, you're spending a lot of time on this.
I think we're going to win. We've got, I think the question is going to be, I think we'll get a majority. The question is, are we going to have a really good majority, which would be really helpful.
Look, 53 or 54 is a lot better than 51. Mm-hmm. And we could. I mean, it's...
Georgia we can pick up, Nevada, Arizona, New Hampshire, and there's some other states. We have great people running. The Democrats are in trouble. Biden's numbers are bad. So, we just got to raise our money.
Yeah. So as I look at the states, the 4 you listed are the natural 4 obvious pickups. Georgia and Arizona, they're still red states. They elected 2 Democratic senators, but they're structurally red states for a long time. Georgia, I'm optimistic. So I've endorsed Herschel Walker. I think he's a strong candidate. I think that's a very winnable seat. Yep. He needs to be disciplined. They need to run a good campaign. Right. But I think if they do that, Georgia's a very winnable seat. Arizona is likewise winnable. There's a messy primary right now. I haven't picked a horse yet. I'm just letting it play out a little bit. Right. But I think if we get a strong candidate in Arizona, that's a winnable seat.
If there was a poll just the other day, Kelly against a Republican, we win.
Yeah.
And so we just got to get.
Well, and someone like Kelly, look, you and I both serve with Mark. He's a nice guy. He campaigned, he's an astronaut. He seems like...
Moderate, right?
He doesn't seem like a lunatic socialist. His problem is twofold, and it's 2 of our colleagues. His problem is Kyrsten Sinema and Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Number 1, Sinema has actually been willing to buck her own party.
Right.
And has behaved much more like a moderate than Kelly has. He's suddenly revealed naked because he doesn't have the guts to do what Sinema's doing. But then secondly, Bernie Sanders. Kelly votes with Bernie Sanders on almost every damn thing we have. Right. And so it becomes much harder to go back and say, I'm a moderate just like Bernie Sanders. Nevada, I'm very optimistic about Nevada. I've endorsed Adam Laxalt. I think he's a great candidate up in Nevada. I think I probably put that as the most likely pickup we have in the country right now, Nevada.
He's leading even in the general election.
Yeah. And then New Hampshire... If we have a good candidate, New Hampshire is winnable.
Yeah. I think we're going to
win. Beyond that, you've got states, you and I have talked about Colorado. I think Colorado is winnable. And then you go to a little bit more stretches.
But we have good candidates running. You take Tiffany Smiley up in Washington. We've got good people in Connecticut.
Vermont.
We got a wonderful individual in Vermont running. So.
Illinois. And by the way, when I got here 10 years ago, we had a Republican from Illinois.
Yeah, Mark Kirk,
Look, is Illinois winnable in a normal year? Probably not.
No.
But in a really good year, Illinois is winnable. You look at Illinois, it's actually a conservative state with a lunatic lefty Chicago stuck in it.
Right.
Like the rest of the state is quite conservative, but the question is, how does Chicago vote? The flip side, as you know well, we've got the opportunity to pick up, 2 to 4 is a very reasonable outcome. Then the question is, do we lose any? And we got a bunch of our guys on the ballot, and I got to say my optimism there has grown. So 6 months ago...
You'd be more worried. Yeah. Biden's numbers are so bad. So.
In Texas, Biden, his unfave is 32-62. Yeah. No Democrat is winning in Texas when the incumbent president is at -30.
Yeah. All right, we're going to finish here. I want to thank my good friend Ted Cruz for being here. If you want to help us, text WIN at 55404. Help make sure we have the resources to make sure we have big wins so we can control the agenda, turn this country around. So thanks again for being here. This is the NRSC Red Zone.